So we've already reached number 9, and the intention was to follow a scheme that we had, and that this stimulus talk would be about the 5th of the 5 principles of middle way, called integration. I know a lot of the future things that Robert plans for us to discuss in future network meetings are expanding on the idea of integration and looking at the way it works in different ways. So I'm only giving a brief introduction, and in fact the way I'm going to do it, and I feel like I can only get away with this because Robert's not with us, is I'm going to read to you an extract from Robert's book, Middle Way for Beginners, which is called Miggleism, which is a term that was before my time, so I'm not quite sure. Someone came up with it. So I really am going to read that section of the book, because I was looking at various things thinking, what am I going to say? How am I going to avoid it just being a rehash of what Robert has said elsewhere, because he said it so well. And to be honest, when I was reading it this morning, I thought, well, I might as well just read it. If you have read Miggleism, then you know, it's a chance to hear it again. And I've created some pictures to go with it at various points. So I'll do a share screen and do it that way. At the end, there's a summary, so I'll leave that up probably if there are any questions that we can discuss all together. And there are also some stimulus questions relating to integration for us to take into our groups and use as we see fit. So I will do the screen share thing, which I have tested out, and it does work. So hopefully now, that's it. You can see the cover of, I've only got a virtual version of it, so that's the virtual cover of Miggleism with the picture of the 2 mules who will feature. So it is quite nice to see all of you. Sorry, it's changed my view slightly. That's better. Okay. Let's get everything where I want it to be. There we go. Right. So you should just be able to possibly see, depending on the device you're using, a small box with my head in it talking, which says hello behind. But hopefully most of it is taken up with, at the moment, the cover of the book that I'm reading from. So the section that I'm looking at is called How Integration Works. And so remembering that it's from Robert's perspective, so some of the details, I'm just reading it as is, but a lot of what I'm going to say, what I'm going to read, like this is the point where I wish I hadn't done it virtually, because hang on, I'm going to press refresh. Yeah, all good. Right, okay, so the virtual book nearly let me down. So I'm reading from the section called How Integration Works. It'll be about 15 minutes. And if I remember, the pictures that you're seeing on the PowerPoint I'm showing you should match up with what I'm saying. So here it goes. So how integration works. If the process of integration that allows us to recognize fallibility, sorry, I'll start again. It is the process of integration that allows us to recognize fallibility, for it's only as we recognize the limitations of one cognitive model that we can let our guard down sufficiently to unite it with another. Much of my own direct experience of how this happens comes from meditation. I first learnt to meditate as a fresh undergraduate student at Cambridge, keen to try out everything. During my first few days as a fresher, I met a flamboyant theologian with a Sanskrit name, an ordained Buddhist, who invited me to a Buddhist meditation class. This turned out to be the beginning of a personal practice that persists to this day, a practice that is rarely profound, but nearly always helps to balance my mental states and limit my tendency towards obsessive certainty. The first step in meditation is to relax one's body sufficiently so it becomes heavy and a physical restlessness falls away, at least temporarily. One also seeks a posture that's upright and open-chested without being rigid, which together with physical relaxation can enable feelings of energy to run up the body. At the same time, one needs to focus on the object of the meditation, which in the case of my own habitual practice is usually the breath. The focus on the object, relaxation, and physical energy all need to work together so that one inches into a relaxed and concentrated state and leaves behind anxious, angry, or desirous thoughts. Not that one leaves behind thought, this is a common misunderstanding in meditation, but that one's thoughts become more aware, spacious, and under control. The point of meditation, just like the point of science, is not to get to a truth, but to make incremental progress in avoiding delusion. In meditation, that delusional state is represented by distraction, and progress is made by working with one's distractions rather than by reaching any kind of positively ideal state. One can work with distractions in two kinds of ways: relaxation and stimulation. Each of these ways will need to be carefully targeted. For example, if I'm buzzing with anxious thoughts about someone that I need to communicate with in a challenging way, I'll relax those thoughts by bringing my awareness much more into the body. That's what the photo, is supposed to represent. So bringing awareness more into the body. Since all meaning is embodied, I can put the meaning of those anxious thoughts into a bigger context without denying or blocking them by relaxing their meaning into a bigger bodily meaning. Once that bodily awareness is more fully achieved, I can start to return to the object of meditation. On the other hand, if I'm too placid and experience little energy in the meditation, there's a danger of sleepiness. In this kind of circumstance, it's a sharper and more focused meaning that's needed in my meditation. Focusing more strongly on the object of meditation will help here. If I'm focusing on the breath, I look for sharp and vivid experiences of energy in my sensations of the breath as they enter the nostrils. Meditation is a constant process of adjustment and readjustment. One begins to get into the meditation and then gets distracted, then makes the adjustments. However, as soon as I start to feel I'm succeeding in some way, most likely another distraction will gradually start to creep in. In a similar way, just as when a scientist feels he's discovered the final definitive laws of nature, some challenge will creep in somewhere. And just as we feel we have the correct moral answers, our certainty will begin to be undermined by alternative moral perspectives from elsewhere. I can make gradual progress in meditation, not only by entering an increasingly coherent meditative state, but also by maintaining a sense of fallibility. I always need to be subtly on my guard against the possibility of falling back into distraction. As I make such progress, I'm entering a state of temporary integration. That means, to some degree, and for the moment, my energies are increasingly working together, rather than against each other, like the two mules. They've come up before. I think everyone was here when they came up before, but anyway, I've put the picture up there. The model of the world that I'm working with also becomes one that encompasses a wider picture, within which those energies can be reconciled, just as the two mules managed to fulfill both their desires by reconsidering the situation. When they start working together, the two mules maintain an increasingly coherent representation of their situation. However, they would never have been able to reconsider their situation at all if they'd not had some sense of the fallibility of their previous view. When a distraction is overcome in meditation, it's like one of those mules. Imagine one mule wanting to do the meditation and focus on the breath, whilst the other wants to think about breakfast instead. They have a tug of war, and sometimes one starts to win, sometimes the other, but they remain frustrated because neither does the meditation improve, nor is the desire for breakfast fulfilled. Finally, the meditator gets in touch with a sense of fallibility. The desire to meditate cannot be fulfilled without taking into account the desire for breakfast, but a life in which one only thought about breakfast and made no progress in meditation would also be less satisfying. The answer is thus to focus fully on the meditation first, then finish the meditation and have breakfast. With that awareness, the two energies can, at least temporarily, be united. Each is able to eat their bale of hay at a time. Then think about the similar position of a scientist, or perhaps a group of scientists who are working together on a research project. Here, the two desires involve, on the one hand, loyalty to a theory, which I've represented as a red postbox, and on the other hand, the potential distraction of evidence that could be interpreted in a different way, contrary to the theory, perhaps with an alternative theory to explain it. Each could ignore the other, and the tug of war would continue. The scientists would continue with their project, but niggling doubts still continue to undermine it. Or the scientists could allow themselves to be diverted into an alternative channel by the exploration of apparent counter-evidence, and they need to explain that counter-evidence. In order to be able to integrate those energies, they need to be seen as part of a larger picture. The exploration of counter-evidence needs to be not just a gesture towards open-mindedness, but it needs to be appreciated that this exploration actually contributes substantially towards the research project. The research project, after all, will not be fulfilled by finding a truth of nature, but rather by effectively investigating counter-arguments and taking them into account in an increasingly objective theory. Or let us compare this with another dilemma, that of an artist. This artist has been working in one kind of medium for some time, let's say a particular style of abstract painting. It is quite satisfying, is explored with a growing sense of meaning, and is helping her sell a few pictures. However, more recently, an alternative desire has begun to niggle at her, a desire to explore a rather different medium. There is the occasional sense that she's stuck in a groove with the abstracts. Perhaps she could try sculpture or collage or representational painting. This dissatisfaction with her current medium is beginning to disrupt her focus on her work. Again, the two mules could have a tug of war. The satisfaction with the current work continued to be undermined, and yet no new kind of work would be started. She needs to find a new vision of her work that will encompass both the old form and some new kind of form. Integration is then a basic feature of human experience and a basic way in which people increase the objectivity of their judgments. If we only bring metaphysical beliefs to these judgments, the two mules will carry on stubbornly tugging at each other and no progress will be made. If, on the other hand, we are able to bring a sense of fallibility as well as a coherence of view to our judgments, it's possible both for our beliefs to gain an increasingly long-term objectivity and our desires to become increasingly focused in effective ways. Integration then is not just a state of psychological health, nor is it limited to aesthetic, moral or scientific judgments. Rather, it provides a model for the process by which objectivity can be achieved at every level of human experience. It can be applied from the most reflective individual experience, as in meditation, and also to political, social and scientific debates that involve large numbers of people. The basic reason why integration works and why it provides a model for objectivity is that it is consistent with universal experience. Meditation is a good place to start only because it obliges us to focus on that experience free of distraction in a way that few other activities do. But there is nothing magic about meditation and no truths to be discovered in meditation. The process of integration depends at every point on acceptance of uncertainty and ignorance. So that's the end of the section that I'm reading, and I've put up on the shared screen now the summary from the end of that chapter. If you're able to look at the video that was recommended in the email that sort of announced this particular stimulus talk, there was also a summary at the end there. This summary is really, like I say, it's just about the beginning of looking into the process of integration and its sort of many facets. So I don't know how clear it is to people, but it says on there that integration occurs, this is the summary, integration occurs through the relaxation of opposing desires and the consideration of opposing beliefs. The process of integration does not involve discoveries of truth, but rather the gradual ruling out of alternatives so that energy can be focused in one area, increasingly be focused in one area. And the third point is a balance, which we're referring to as the middle way, is always required between maintaining current desires and beliefs and the consideration of challenges leading to coherence, the consideration of coherence and fallibility. So that's the section that I wanted to read from the book. I see Anne-Laura's got the book, actually got the book there. Like I said, what Robert wrote in there, I mean, I don't know, I started meditating, I can't remember when it was, but let's say 5 or 6 years ago. I've not been doing it for quite as long as Robert, but I appreciate the points he's making. even if my own experience is, is slightly different, or I might focus on slightly different things, I still have the general idea and see it as a process, as a way of making myself aware of, my fallibility and so on, in the same way that Robert does. So that's something that resonates with me. One of the things perhaps that is the most common in this example of meditation, of dealing with distraction, or in working with distraction is probably a better way of saying it, is sometimes realizing if I do feel agitated, sometimes the feeling, with other sort of stimuli shut off, eventually I usually realize that all I have to do is sit there. So if I'm feeling agitated about the actual process of meditating, sometimes it's just that allowing that thought to come up that really all I need to do is just sit there, and we'll see what happens. That's something that quite often happens, and that it feels like a part of a process of learning to do that, of be open to the bigger picture. Reframing, I think, is a phrase that was used a lot in the other in the introductory video that Robert's the one that he'd recommended, the one that's on the YouTube channel about introduction to integration. So looking at it as reframing, looking at the perspective from looking at the picture with a wider perspective, and that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, and you have to make space for it, and perhaps you have to arrange for that to happen in your life, that you will open yourself up to places where space in your life where you will be open to looking at things from a bigger picture and recognizing your own limitations, and hopefully allowing other influences to come in and suggest alternatives, and to be aware of those alternatives. From what I understand, that's where the frowning upon metaphysics and absolute beliefs comes from. That when you hold an absolute belief, it excludes alternatives, it excludes other possibilities, and so the reason for avoiding and steering away from the absolute beliefs is so that we're not shutting down the possibilities and the consideration of alternatives, and recognizing our fallibility as human beings. Okay, I personally, I'm not going to say anything more, though I appreciate talking about some examples of this, perhaps in smaller groups, in the regional groups. Feel free, if you want, to unmute yourself if you have a question you want to ask at this moment. But like I said, I'm not the most confident about talking in. I don't know. We can see, or we can just split into groups if no one has a question at this point.
Hi, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Julian. Yep.
Yeah. It's maybe not fair to ask you this question because it refers to something Robert said last time.
Yes. Okay.
But
Oh no.
equally,
Well, I'll ask anyway. Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to ask it anyway because I mean, even if you couldn't answer, maybe someone else will have some ideas as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I think Robert said something along the lines of, you can't have too much meaning. There's no sort of limit on meaning, as it were.
Yeah.
Then I was kind of struggling to sort of resolve that a little bit with the notion of integrating meaning. That you could have meanings that are inconsistent. So in that case, just more inconsistent meanings isn't really helpful.
Yeah.
That they need to be. There's some kind of, I don't know. I was just trying to sort of marry that up in my head, really.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. Well, no, I don't have like a instant reply to it, but so no, I like the idea of. I think it was in one of Robert's books. I don't think it was in Migism, but it was referred to as Heron's beard, and the idea is the beard is meaning, and you just let. Sorry for the overly masculine metaphor, but the idea is that you just let you can just let the beard grow, let the beard of meaning grow, and I think that's from my understanding of it, it's sort of the meaning is like a fund of meaning, and if you let it grow, then you're open to a wider range of influences. I know in our group we've talked about things like reading fiction, that brings some other person, or it's not always a person, I suppose, even, but it brings other people's perspectives into your awareness that, you know, you're not going to have access to it, or just talking with people about, you know, how they're feeling it, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so I know that some of the next stimulus talks and topics for discussion are going to be sort of further dwelling on integration of desire, integration of meaning, integration of belief. So I don't think I have any like instant response to what you're saying, but I'm sure that when we're doing the integration of meaning one, that will be the time. But yeah, I know I do know what you mean. But then on the other hand, if you look at the way that some sort of absolute beliefs work, they're the opposite. They say, you know, you don't look for, you know, you don't allow meaning to grow. It's like allegory, saying that a particular metaphor, there is one particular interpretation of it, and that's the right one, because it is, and just shutting down the idea of allowing meaning to, sorry, of allowing there to be other meanings, which means you're not looking at able to look at, well, you're not able to take into account fallibility, or you know, looking at alternatives, or the bigger picture. So I think it's to be contrasted with that, probably.
I might say something.
Yes, please do. Yes, go ahead, Bridget.
As a psychotherapist, as a narrative psychotherapist,
yeah,
one of our fundamentals is that human beings are meaning making. That's what we do. We create meaning. When someone comes with a problem, they've attached meanings, and they're often hidden meanings, assumed meanings, which are not overt, they're covert meanings. And as we tease out certain meanings, the job is to find alternate meanings. So it is a bit like that beard. So you have one meaning, but it's a meaning that's creating problems for a person, and it's often supported by a lot of structures in society, those dominant meanings. And as we work more and more on finding out alternate meanings of who wouldn't agree with that, who do you know that might think differently to that, and who do you feel comfortable with, and how do they create meaning? Or in different cultures that I've worked with, what is the meaning around HIV, and how do you create that meaning? And the more we kind of work with meanings, the more plastic they become and the more fluid they become. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Is that question overlapping with belief? It sounds like there's the two things flow together somehow, but the term I wanted to raise a question about was objectivity, which seemed to sort of pop up out of nowhere.
Yes.
So I was interested in that. So as a model for objectivity, that suddenly just appeared, and then I wasn't sure of the context of it.
I think, again, because I'm using someone else's work, basically, I think Robert's thesis was called something like a theory of moral objectivity. So it is a term that he uses in a specific way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perhaps a little bit different. I mean, again, using someone else's words, when he uses the word energy, as you know, I'm a physics teacher, so I have a particular association with the word energy, and then it feels like it's wrong when people, but I've come to understand that people use that. You know, it means a whole load of different things in different contexts. The objectivity,
it might become clearer when we go through the three aspects.
Yeah, but he's not necessarily referring to like an objective truth with a capital T kind of thing. It's about this incremental thing of basically avoiding making yourself steering yourself away from delusion. So sort of wrong ideas to whatever the wrong ideas.
Right.
Yeah, it's about avoiding a delusion, I think, rather than having a particular objective truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
Certainly, sorry, yeah, certainly that, yeah, you're right. It did appear to come from nowhere in there, but that's kind of because I've taken that section out of a book, and I'm using someone else's words as well. So, okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's all right.
The more I look at this, the more it strikes me as being quite easy to state, but very, very difficult potentially to achieve.
Yes.
Words like gradual ruling out of alternatives, for example. you know, the people then ask questions like, on what criteria are you ruling those out? And my criteria may not be your criteria. And so, you know, the more I can see why we're going to need to unpack this.
Yes, yeah, and it's like I say, it definitely will be a longer I mean, I read all of like a few years ago. I read Robert's the omnibus of his books about middle way philosophy, and they were basically sort of the things that we've covered so far was sort of the introduction, and then the rest of it, the rest of that book and the other three volumes were all about integration and what it means in a middle way context. But I think the thing to take away from this is that it's about an avoidance of absolutes, which are in the idea of the middle way, you know, that's what's going to lead to less adequate outcomes. Whereas, like you say, how do you positively decide? Well, that's almost wide open. But the key thing is with the middle way that it's, as it says wherever it was, rather than discovering a particular truth, it's more about ruling out things that aren't, and the things that we're trying to identify and avoid. Well, I say above all else, but pretty much exclusively are absolute beliefs that that aren't open to examination or basically can't be integrated either.
Could we just use the term fixed views instead of absolute belief? Because absolute belief sounds a bit kind of ultimate, which we don't usually go around thinking of ultimate things all the time, do we? It may be just
Probably,
the way.
yes, yeah. It's something that we need to consider because like I say, the terms used are probably things that Robert was using in his thesis originally and has carried on using. But how you know, as I said, like the word energy to me, even though I understand that there are other meanings that people associate with the word energy, it still jars me. To be honest, the word integration, I've got used to it now, but ever since I did A-level maths, integration is a part of calculus, and then I became a teacher, and they talked about differentiation, which so all these words that there are all these words that are used in good faith by people, if you like, in a particular way, and then there's a lot of scope for misunderstanding. Well, not misunderstanding. There's a lot of scope, but it's this idea of like you say you've made a suggestion. It's the exploration probably where where the work will be done, and where hopefully we'll be able to find something that, or basically to improve our understanding of what the terms are and what we mean by it, and whether or not we think that's an appropriate thing to use that will be helpful. So, Anne-Laure, did you want to say something? I don't know if you were just stretching or. Oh, you need to unmute That's it.
Okay. I am at a place where I'm often stumble with the philosophical language. And so I printed out the glossary to the omnibus edition, and I refer to it a lot.
Yeah.
Even there, I find sometimes the definitions difficult to follow, but I thought I'd read out the one on integration.
Yeah, please do,
because because several people have touched on things that are in this. He says integration is the progressive uniting of apparently opposed entities by incrementalizing them and adopting the qualities of each to the extent that they address conditions. This is a dialectical process. I guess I think also of integration because of my interest in the arts. And what Bridget was talking about earlier in sort of meaning involving alternative meanings or finding alternative meanings. I think of integration also as that what he's talking about, the incrementalizing of opposing entities, is being a real creative process. That you really do have to have access to a wide awareness to tackle something like that, and that that in that sense, it's a kind of interesting challenge to deal with, an inviting kind of challenge. Anyway.
Thank you. What I'm realizing is that you're saying things that's kind of making me think of examples, which actually probably neatly takes us on to breaking up into some smaller groups and looking at the reflection questions, because I've already started sort of thinking of rethinking what I thought about the first one.